To develop something new that solves a significant problem and creates real value for customers, you have to take risk proportionate to the potential return. Yet most people are conditioned to avoid risk. Leading innovation requires a willingness to pursue a goal without knowing exactly how you'll achieve it. To overcome the fear of failure and move forward with the pursuing the unknown, leaders must learn to embrace the concept of being directionally correct. Today, my guest, former Olympian Adam Kreek, and I discuss topics such as leadership lessons he learned from his rowing experiences, what responsibility ethic actually means, the different locuses of control his team dealt with integrating new members into it, amongst many other topics. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, Responsibility Ethic, former Olympian Adam Kreek.
Welcome to this episode of Moving Forward Leadership. Stick around and learn how to achieve, excel, and become a leader that people willingly follow. Lead, don't boss. And now, here's the host of our show, Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy.
Welcome one, welcome all. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy. And welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, where we focus in on the three domains of leadership. And that is leading yourself so that you can be that best leader that you want to be. Leading your team so that you can make a cohesive unit that's tightly knit and bonded together. And then finally, leading your organization so that you can increase its output, whatever that output is. And here at Moving Forward Leadership, we take my 20 years of military experience, couple that with rock star world-class guests such as former Olympian Adam Kreek, and we bring this show to you. So it's so good to have you here. I am so excited to bring you Adam. All the guests here at the show are amazing. But, you know, it's when you get those top performers, those top tier performers like former Navy SEALs such as John Havlick and Mark Devine that I've had on the show before, former commanders, former CEOs, you know, you get all these top tier people, and now we bring in former Olympian. Anyway, so if you don't know who Adam Kreek is, obviously he's a former two-time, actually, Olympian, and he only holds 60 international medals, and he's only been inducted into multiple Hall of Fames. But hey, he's only got a gold medal to his name as well from the Olympics. But you know what? He's taken all those experiences, and now he shares winning strategies from them to help people to understand that the strongest minds prevail. So he's giving talks such as this one from startups to Fortune 500 companies, including Microsoft, GE, the Chicago Blackhawks, Mercedes-Benz. Keep it going. It just keeps going and going. And with that, he's talking about how leaders can clarify values, strategy, develop high-performing teams, manage change, and maximize leadership capacity. So you're in for a treat today, folks. Now, before I stop talking and let you listen to Adam's stories and just amazing offers that he has to give us, I got one thing to ask you. And that is, when I say go, I want you to hit pause and immediately hit share on this episode and fire this episode to someone who you think would be interested in listening to a former Olympian talk about leadership and organizational change and developing teams. All the things that we talk about here at Moving Forward Leadership. All right, so ready, set, go. And welcome back. I had to throw that in, you know, the little sport reference there just for humor. Anyway, that's enough for me now. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation talking about the responsibility ethic with former Olympian Adam Kreek. Adam, man, welcome to the show. I'm so stoked to have you here.
It's great to be here.
From time to time, I throw out awards to the guests of Moving Forward Leadership podcast. You are not the first rower on the podcast. Of course, we were just chatting. I had said I had Jason Codwell on the show, but you are the first Olympian and gold medalist Olympian to be on the show. So congratulations. I'm sure that award can get printed off and put next to the medal somewhere, or probably not.
I'll put it somewhere.
So what I like to do is get the guests first, a little bit about themselves, who they are, how they got to where they are today, and especially for your case, how did you really get into rowing? And then we'll dive into your experiences from that. How does that sound?
That sounds good. So I'll introduce myself. My name's Adam Kreek. I'm an executive business coach. I work with aspiring professionals who are looking to increase their status within their organization and increase their earnings within their organization. Those tend to be my target clients, people who have their eyes on the C-suite, from moving from middle management up into the C-suite. And I got there as an Olympic rower. I grew up in London, Ontario, just down the street from you in Kingston. And rode on the Thames River in London, Ontario. Eventually took a break, worked on the oil rigs up in northern Alberta. Was a roughneck for a while, slammed some steel. Then came down to Victoria on Vancouver Island, where I trained for a couple of years with the University of Victoria. Then I dropped out of school, trained full-time for the Athens Olympics, went to the Athens Olympics, lost. Then I went down to California to Stanford University, finished my degree in geotechnical engineering. Felt like I wasn't finished with this whole Olympic thing, came back with my crew, and we made a charge for the Beijing Olympics. This time it was great. We won the World Championships in 2007, then won the Olympics in 2008. After 2008, came back to Victoria, started into the world of motivational speaking. It's a bit of a rubber chicken circuit. I just won an Olympic gold medal. Let's go to conferences. And that pushed me into the whole executive coaching, strategic planning space, where I'll run. I run executive retreats and work with individuals within organizations. But then in 2013, after 4 years of planning, we decided to take a rowboat across the ocean. It was self-supported. We weren't part of on a race or an event or anything. We were just completely alone in the middle of the ocean. It took us 73 days to get to the Bermuda Triangle, in which we capsized. And that was 2013. 7 years ago, and here we are in the midst of the end, hopefully, of the COVID lockdown, and and here I am again as an executive business coach and a strategic consultant.
That's an interesting run of events, from up north in Alberta, roughnecking in the camps up there and working on the oil patch to Beijing and the Olympics. So I guess my real first question is, you were part of a team which went and won Olympic gold. You were on another team which went down to the Bermuda Triangle out on your own for I forget, how many days did you just say? It was like 70 something?
73.
Yeah, 73 days. What leadership lessons came out of those experiences? I assume there's definitely going to be some serious leadership lessons, some teamwork lessons in there, maybe one or two that you can expand upon.
Yeah, there's a lot of leadership lessons that came out along the way. And that's the basis of a book, book I wrote, Responsibility Ethic. Just published it a year ago. We'll be launching the audiobook in a few months. But one of the key lessons I learned was about failure and success. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, as leaders, we're going to have our, as we become leaders and as we have a more public face, our successes and our failures become more public. And so they become more emotionally loaded. So success and failures start to be more difficult as we manage them, especially within an organization. So say you have a specific target or a task that you need to accomplish and it falls apart, or you have the task and a target that you need to accomplish and you blow it out of the water. It's important to acknowledge that success and failure are two sides of the same coin. And it's obviously nice to win, and that's what motivates us. It motivates me. I'm a highly competitive person. I have very high personal standards. Yet, I haven't gotten there without dealing with failure and having different concepts with regards to failure. And one of my favorite concepts is this idea of cluster benefits, and the idea that when we set a goal, we should have that big goal that we're going for. I call that a gold medal moment. It takes us 4 years to accomplish at least that gold medal moment. It should be compelling. It should be inspire our vision. It should it should inspire us to lead others. And underneath that, we should have a lot of other smaller benefits that would occur on the achievement of that goal. So, for example, when I was rowing across the ocean, the goal was to row from Dakar, Senegal, in West Africa to Miami, Florida. And underneath that, there was a cluster of benefits. We were able to reach 30,000 school kids. That was a benefit. We were able to tell our story to media across Canada and the USA. And we were able to encourage people to take adventures, which was very compelling. As individuals, we were able to create stories that would last our lifetime and memories that would last a lifetime. We were able to conduct science, and we were able to study human psychology, human biology. We studied ocean sciences, the quality of the water. And we were able to generate data that contributed to people's research and help people achieve their master's degrees and PhDs and create postdoctoral studies. So there are all these benefits that were being achieved while we were in pursuit of that big gold medal moment, that big goal. And so I think when we do have goals that we are setting professionally and career-wise, we need to understand that we often do it more for the cluster of benefits that we achieve on the way than for the end point itself. It's kind of like I've got this plaque on my wall. I'll pull it out here. Read that for me.
What you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals. Henry David Thoreau?
Yeah, Thoreau. Henry David Thoreau.
Thoreau. That's a new one to me.
Yeah, what you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals. And so it's this idea of self-actualization and us, and through achievement, you should hope that you become more of the person you are. And I've seen it and I was lucky to have gone to the Olympics and to have achieved a lot of my dreams when I was really young and to have seen both sides of the coin. Because I've, having gone to the Olympics and lost, and also having gone to the Olympics and won, I saw that there are people who would, they'd be relatively satisfied at the end of what you might say could be an unsuccessful career. They didn't win a medal. They didn't make an A final. They spent 12 years pursuing it, yet they left very satisfied. And there's obviously people who left dissatisfied. But then on the other side, where you wouldn't necessarily anticipate it, is when people win gold medals. Yes, there's people who win gold medals, they leave and say, this is exactly what I wanted, and they go on with their life, and they're very happy. But there's a lot of people who'd experience what I call gold medal syndrome, where they get everything they wanted, and they're still unhappy. And I think part of it was this concept that they thought that by achieving their goal, they would become someone who they were not. It would all of a sudden, it would fix other problems that they were trying to solve. And they thought that this one win or this one success would solve these other problems that they were dealing with. And it's, it reminds me of this, I was working with this engineer consultant for one of the big consulting firms. I was coaching him. And he was saying that he wanted a leadership position. I want to move higher up the hierarchy. And so we go through the personality profile. Then we're talking with him, and after a couple of sessions, he comes to the conclusion: I don't want to move up the hierarchy. I really like my work and my job. I'm just really frustrated that people aren't listening to me, that people aren't showing me that I'm valued, and that I'm not working on projects that I want to work on, and I can't get my ideas across. And so when we started working on these skills that actually truly mattered to him, and he could become a better communicator, he could express himself, he could contribute to these projects he found really compelling, then I don't need to have that rank. I'm becoming the person I truly actually want to be, and I'm happier in this position because it suits who I am, and my achievements help me be more me versus morphing me into someone who I'm not, and I feel like I'm a crab in a shell that doesn't belong to me, and I've got to shed it and put one on that actually fits.
I really like that. I like that analogy and that ideology, because I had a very similar experience. I was coaching somebody. They got promoted. They got promoted into a very similar scenario, mid-manager level. The real first quote unquote leadership role, management role, and they hated it. And they're like, "This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't what I thought it was going to be like." And by the time we were done coaching, what ended up happening was, and this may actually look bad on me, but they ended up quitting the job. But it wasn't because they were not a good leader. It wasn't because they weren't a good manager. It was just for them, specifically, what they wanted, their skill sets, the pain of what that job brought to them personally was not worth what they were getting out of it. And they were just like, you know what? This is just not for me. And they ended up going back. And the reality is that they were pretty close to retiring anyway. They just wanted to get better. So they held out. And he ended up retiring from working completely about 5 years after going back to his old job. But it was just funny how you say that, because sometimes, you're right. We do have those goals. Individual leaders, whether that's in a leadership role or just us as an individual, like, oh, I want to do this. And then you don't realize what actually comes to get it, or what comes with it when you get there. Yeah.
We see the power and we see the freedom that exists higher up in the hierarchy, but we don't always see the responsibilities that need to be taken, and the energy and the effort that need to be put towards solving human. Well, often it's human problems. It's people problems. It's you can have the best ideas, but unless you can bring people along for the ride to digest your ideas and adopt your ideas, then it'll be frustrating. And likewise, the more you move up the hierarchy, everyone underneath you comes to you to solve their people problems. And so you become, you need more skills to deal with others more effectively.
Absolutely. And with that, the quote Spider-Man, right? Come great power comes great responsibility. It's basically that. And then, many people don't necessarily see, as you pointed out, the other side of that coin. And I really liked how you frame that, in that there are two sides of the coin for experiences, right? There's the failure, and then there's winning, or the good thing of it. And failure is definitely one of the biggest teachers that you can get out there. So I really liked how you framed that. Now, usually one of the questions I ask is, what's the inspiration behind the book? But you kind of articulated that very well.
Yeah, well, the inspiration behind the book was to translate my life experiences of Olympic rower, of transatlantic adventurer into, and I think it hits a lot of your target audience, to leaders and emerging leaders. What can you are you inspired by sports stories? Are you inspired by adventure stories? And do you want to be a better leader in your organization? Well, then this is the book for you to read, because there's tons of great stories of almost dying in the middle of the ocean, or winning the Olympics, or losing at the Olympics. And then we talk about ideas of success and failure, coaching and mentoring, sharing leadership, resilience, teamwork, this idea of providence, of making sure that we have faith in our own abilities and we work really hard. Talk about how to make better decisions, how to tell your story more effectively, a bunch of different tools, how to communicate more effectively. It's a
let's
good
dive in, shall we?
Book. Okay, what do we want to talk about?
Well, I want to, responsibility ethic, the name of the book. What are you really diving at with that? What does it mean, responsibility ethic, from your point of view?
Well, it's exactly what we were talking about earlier. With great power comes great responsibility. With the more freedom you want, the more responsibility you need to adopt. So the book is written for people who have a well-developed locus of control. And so the locus of control is a psychological concept that was developed in the 1960s. And they identified people who either made things happen or felt like life happened to them. And this is a mindset piece. But if you feel like you can make things happen, then you have a high locus of control. If you feel like life happens to you, then you have a low locus of control. And it goes back even farther to, Stoic philosophy is very popular these days. And, I love reading the stuff that, Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus or, Seneca have written about philosophy back in the day. And that's often what they would talk about too. I can't always control the thing that happens to me. I can't control if someone shouts at me when I'm walking down the street. I can't control if someone speeds across the lane and almost runs into me in my car, or if someone yells at me in the store. But I can measure my response, and I can control how I respond, and I can train that response. Especially as an athlete, right? I went through the experience of learning how to train how I would respond to a given situation. And so psychologically, this is what we can do. And so the responsibility ethic, there's people who wait for things to happen. There's people who watch things happen. There's people who just wonder what the heck happened. And there's people who make things happen. So the book is written for people who make things happen and have a high locus of control. So if you are within your organization and you feel empowered to make a change within your organization, you say, look, here's a bunch of issues and problems that I see. The management should be doing this. We should be communicating in this way. We should be managing change in this way. We should be training our people in a different way. You see change, and then you believe that you're part of the change. That's how you make success happen, and that's how you make the future happen. So when we talk about the responsibility ethic, it's about taking responsibility for those feelings you have of discontent and taking action to fix them. So if I'm discontented in my job, figure out why you're discontented. Are you discontented because you don't have the positional authority? Or are you discontented because you don't have the communication ability? Are you discontented because you don't have the right coaching or mentoring relationship? Are you disappointed because you just don't have the right resilience skills to deal with the challenges of your job? Are you disappointed because you don't have the right teamwork skills or leadership skills? And so if you're facing an issue and you actually want to fix it, then you have what I would call the responsibility ethic.
I really like that. And I like that locus of control concept. I'll tell you, the listener definitely has a high locus of control. They're hungry. They're frothy at the mouth. They're here. The reason why they're listening to the podcast in the first place is because they want to better themselves. That's the reason why I'm doing the podcast. That's the reason why I started the podcast in the first place. Was I was selfish. I'm like, you know what? I want to learn more about this topic. And this is a good way to do it. And I might as well just share what I learned to other people for free. So we want to learn more. We have that high locus control. We're like, okay, I want to do better. I'm in. Now, in your book, you talk about 12 different strategies. I'm interested if we can go into a couple of them just so that we can get an idea of what's in there for the listener. Because what I like to do is give them a good Wave Top's understanding what the book is about, because that's what's probably going to drive them to go check it out more and hopefully buy it for you. And oh, by the way, I checked it on Amazon for you, the listener. 39 reviews at 4.5 stars on the plus end of that 4.5 stars. So you're probably going to want to buy it anyway. So why don't we dive into a couple of those strategies for the listener out there, so that they have an understanding of really, responsibility ethic, the locus control, and all these different topics. The top is the loneliest place. Colin Powell said that once. But it doesn't have to be. Instead, you can find people to talk to, people to run ideas by, people to help you figure out solutions to the problems that you're facing right now as a leader. And see, I felt alone once, and I decided to start the podcast. And with the podcast, I decided that I needed to help people like you more. So that's why I started the Moving Forward Leadership Facebook group. Leadership skills for managers to be leaders, not bosses. You can find it at movingforwardleadership.com/group. And come join us. It's completely free for you to join us and talk leadership with us day in, day out. So check us out again at movingforwardleadership.com/group. Now back to the show. Responsibility ethic, the locus control, and all these different topics.
So let's, we're talking about leadership. So let's talk about sharing leadership. That's chapter 3. And it was one of the biggest lessons I learned on my Olympic journey. Say the contrast between our boat that fell apart and cracked in the Athens Olympics and the boat that won gold in Beijing. And there were some things that we changed as athletes, and there are some things we changed as the crew. Five of our crew remained from Athens to Beijing, but we had 4 new crew members. We changed certain things like our warm-up. We made our warm-up shorter. But I'd say from a leadership perspective and a mental model perspective, we went from a more hierarchical-based leadership model to a shared leadership model. And a shared leadership model works really well in, I'll say, smaller teams where there's enough interaction between individuals where you can pass around the leadership relatively quickly. So I'd say teams under the size of 10, maybe 12. Once you start having teams of 15, 20, you have to start having more formalized communication channels. Otherwise, small things start to become left out. And, this is why we have the organizational structures that we do. But the concept of shared leadership is almost self-explanatory. It's the metaphor I like to use is one of a conductor versus one of a jazz band. So in a traditional leadership model, you have the conductor who's up there and they're saying, follow the beat, follow the beat. I have the score, I've written the score, and if something's wrong, I'll go and we'll change the score of the first violin or the piccolo, and everything comes from the conductor. Whereas in a jazz band, the jazz band will, they'll be playing, and then the trumpet player will look over at the drum player and he'll say, oh, the drum player wants to go. And then I'll look at the bass player and they'll, yeah, the drum player is going to go. And then they back off and the drum player goes and he takes the lead for a while. And when the drum player's done, they look, improvises, and it is passed around a little bit more organically and flexibly. But it takes, you need to have high skill to be able to do that. You need to have a high level of comfort with everyone. A high level of trust. But the shared leadership model is very resilient. That's one of the best parts of the shared leadership model, and it's also you can move really fast with it. And I'd say in if I was to bring back to our Athens experience, we had a more hierarchical leadership model in our boat in Athens, and our stroke seat, who was our leader, cracked. We got into Athens, we got into the pressure cooker of the Olympics, and he fell apart. And everybody will reach their cracking point, and nobody's perfect, and no one's infallible. And here we had this guy who reached his cracking point at the wrong time. And we fell apart and we had a crushing, devastating loss. And the cracks started to appear and show when we were in Beijing. Our stroke seat was feeling nervous. A couple of the other guys were having issues. I know I wasn't feeling all there, but when one guy was feeling weak, he'd voice that to the next guy in the team and he'd say, "Hey, I don't feel like I can do this." And then the other guy in the team, "Well, what would you do?" You'd say, "Yeah, well, I can do this now. If you can't do it, I can do it." And then you also know when you can't do it, someone else is picking up the slack. And it was more than teamwork, because it was about sharing influence. It was about sharing influence and direction. So when one person had an idea and they were feeling like their idea wasn't quite there, then someone else would come up and they would push. They'd push their ideas forward.
I like that shared leadership concept, especially in small teams, right? And you see that more and more common this day and age in small teams, with the predominance of agile mentality starting to hit companies, corporations, large organizations that do work with smaller independent teams. But the last point there, it's all teamwork, right? And I come from a military background. I'm still serving Canadian Army, and that's how we go through our training, our basic level training and on operations. Yeah, you're not feeling it today? Well, hand me your pack. I'll carry 2. You can't carry the C9, the big machine gun today? We'll pass it over. Take my rifle. We'll swap. You know, all these different things, and it gets ingrained in you when you're that type of group, that cohesion. It just gets ingrained into you, and all suddenly people are watching out for each other, and that's what gets you through those tough times, right?
Well, it does. And you're reminding me of this principle I have with, I climb a lot of mountains now. That's what I do and as a hobby. And my one climbing partner, he has this principle. He was an old rower, and now we're climbing partners. And he calls it the principle of equal suffering. And so even if, and the backpack, it reminds me of a story. We went to climb this mountain called the Golden Hind. And we go out, and it's a 5-day trip, but we decided to do it in 3 days. And so we climb out to the bottom of the mountain. The first day we climb up to the top of the mountain and back down. The second day, and we climb, and we're hiking back out. And we're about 4-6 hours from the end, and my legs are starting to give out on me. And we've got this big descent to do. And I'm just like, I just look at him like, I'm fucked. I'm sorry. Like, but I'm done. And then my climbing partner looks at me and says, "You know what? We've got this principle of equal suffering. So I'm disappointed that I'm not as fucked up as you are. I want to be feeling as horrible as you are." And so again, he takes my back. I've got a 40-pound backpack, and he has maybe 60 pounds in his backpack. So he puts 100 pounds on his back, and he carries that down this massive, 2-hour switchback, and we get to the bottom. And at the end of the day, if it's hard for you and you're wearing no backpack, and it's hard for me and I'm wearing 100 pounds, if it's the equal amount of hard, it doesn't matter what kind of work you're doing. It's just getting there to the end with the team, with your supplies. And that's the type of mentality that, that will get you there.
I love that. It's about the end goal, right? Getting to the end. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I want to boomerang back to, and that was how your boat crew changed, but you had originally five of the original members there, and you end up bringing in 3 new ones. So can you talk a little bit about that process from your standpoint? How were they brought in? How did you integrate? How were they integrated in to the team? How did the team dynamics change? Because we see that all the time with organizations. And as a leader, and especially the listener to the podcast, they're dealing with this on a regular basis. Team members change. Maybe they're only in for a short amount of time. One person gets promoted, another person quits, goes off somewhere else, decides that job isn't for them, whatever. So the team dynamic, the teams themselves are constantly changing. And with that, whenever a team changes, the dynamic changes as well. So I can only imagine at that high level that, when you're prepping to go to the Olympics, it's got to be astronomical pressure cooker. So how did that affect, and how were the guys brought in to the team?
Well, it comes down to culture and structure. We had a culture of training and a culture of work. When we were training for the Olympics, we wouldn't train in the 8 all the time. We would train actually in 2-person boats, 1-person boats, and on rowing machines. Every 6 to 8 weeks, we would have a ranking. So we would know where we stood against one another. And the coach who led the team would constantly communicate that the boat was open. There was no final security for anyone in the high performance environment. And that is a high performance environment. And that's one of the keys to it is a lack of security. And the lack of security tends to generate, an element of that high performance, knowing that if you do not perform, someone else who is performing will take your spot. So the security comes when you're delivering results. And after the Athens Olympics, 2 of the guys ended up retiring and just never coming back. 2 more of them came back. One of them ended up rowing in the pair. He ended up winning a silver medal in the pair at the Beijing Olympics. And the other guy who came back just didn't make the team. He just didn't have the speed. And so it was proven over time that he wasn't able to keep up in the pair or the single or on the rowing machines, and just didn't have the talent to make it into the top boat. The culture definitely did change. And we had our coxswain, which is the guy who steers the boat and commands the boat, and 4 rowers who stayed consistent. And then we had 4 new rowers come in. And so when you're creating a new team, that's basically almost 50%. So we almost had to reinvent the culture, because we had a few very strong personalities come in to be integrated with the way that we would do things. And one of them, most specifically, was this guy by the name of Jake Wetzel, who was one of the best racers we'd ever known, but was had a very aggressive and non-linear way of approaching things, yet which made him an excellent racer, but made the philosophy of training didn't fit in with our current philosophy of training. So the way that we were able to fit him in was we had a culture of excellence and well-established rules. So we knew that every 6 to 8 weeks, we would have a time trial. You would race in a 2-person boat, you'd race in a 1-person boat, you'd race on the rowing machine. And the person who had the fastest times, the people with the 8 fastest times would be in the 8. And so it was known. So if Andrew, who had come back, he was actually our captain in 2004. He didn't make the boat in 2008 because he was never in the top 8. And so it was predictable, it was transparent, and not only did we have the rankings every 8 weeks, every day we would be tested against one another. So you would know who was fast and who wasn't. So there's a lot of transparency in the culture, a lot of clear measurements within the culture, and we had a structure that we could pertain to. We had every Monday we would have a team meeting. We would have 3 practices Monday, 3 practices Tuesday, 2 practices Wednesday, 3 practices Thursday, 3 practices Friday, 2 practices Saturday. And we knew the structure that we would slot into, and you would either slot into it or you'd leave, and people would self-select to come in and self-select to come out. And there's only a certain amount of people who could fit into it. So when we talked about crew change and culture change, transparency and structure were helpful. It was also helpful to have the idea that, one culture, call it culture A, which is the culture remaining from Athens, and you'd have culture B, which is the new culture coming in for Beijing. When they came together, you can have culture A take over, you can have culture B take over, but the best position is to actually have a new culture created altogether, culture C. And so that's what we did. And this was the idea of shared leadership as well. It was co-designing the culture and how we wanted to approach our training, how we wanted to approach our racing, how we would exchange ideas, making sure that everybody felt included, bringing the new people up to speed, and making sure that there is space for them to contribute while they were coming up to speed. Because you'd have a guy like Andrew Burns on our boat who had only been racing internationally for 2 years by the time we went to the Olympics, versus a guy like Jake Wetzel or Dominic Seiderly, who had been to the Sydney Olympics and the Athens Olympics. They've been around racing internationally for 12 years, nearly. So you'd have a big disparity in experience, and just making sure that everybody's thoughts and philosophies were heard and discussed and integrated into the new culture.
I love that concept of making the new culture, because as I said in my preamble there, whenever someone new comes into a team, the culture changes, the team changes, the dynamics change. So with that, the culture is going to change. Maybe it's just a slight change, maybe it's a massive change, but regardless, there's still a little bit of a change. Now, you talked about how transparent the team was, and basically how you had to earn your spot, right? You had to work for your spot. You had to make sure that you're ready to go. And with that, there's a lot of competition. You're competing internally for seat. There's only 8 seats. I don't know exactly how many people were trying out for those 8 seats, but there's only 8 seats regardless, right? And there may have been 10, there might have been 12, might have been 30. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The point is there's only 8 seats, but yet you're supposed to be a team. And we see this in organizations today still. Internally, people are competing for promotions. Internally, people are competing, trying to get the quickest checkout times or the highest sales or whatever, right? And there's this competition, and I am a huge fan of competition. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big sports fan. And I think even competition internally is healthy, but it comes to a point, right? There's that tipping point where it suddenly becomes negative. So in your case, from your standpoint, where you guys were competing for 8 seats, yet you need to be as tight as a crew, the crew as tight as a family when you went over there. How did you find that balance to get there?
Well, it was difficult because there were different personality types. We had around 24 guys within our training center who were competing for those 8 boats, and we'd select those guys usually through speed orders in the fall. The crew would slot in quite quickly because you would share a common goal with everyone, and you knew that everyone had put in the work and wanted to be in that boat. And if there was any one person who didn't want to be in that boat, there were 2 or 3 other guys who could come in and do almost as good of a job as them. And so everyone was grateful to be there, loved being in the boat, and wanted to make it fast. And so I think that was, the intentions were really clear. And that's the beauty of sport and the simplicity of sport, but it's also very different from, say, the corporate sphere, because, as an athlete, and especially an Olympic athlete, your focus is unilateral. And often in the corporate sphere, there's people who are coming at it from different angles who want different things. People will have families, and they'll have other interests outside of work, and they'll be doing other things. Whereas at the Olympic level in the training center, that's all you're doing is competing for these spots. There was a lot of tension in between boats, and that caused some issues. And I think culturally, that was one of the contributing factors to our boat falling apart in Athens. We had a 4 that was put together, and they led a kind of a counterculture within the training center where a lot of animosity was created in between the boats, and that was a bit destructive. So in Beijing, when we talked about having a shared goal, everyone in the training center was selected, and we put extra effort into making sure that we had a unified force. The guys who were the spare pair who never even got to race at the Olympics, the spares, and the ones training at the training center who didn't even get to travel overseas, they were part of our Olympic gold medal win. If it wasn't for them pushing us in training every single day, we wouldn't have gotten to the level that we got to. So I think it was having that higher goal that everyone could buy into that helped to mitigate conflict. And if everyone can buy into that higher goal, if their personal values align with the higher goal of the team, having a shared higher goal that's well defined. Again, it's much more difficult in the corporate sphere. Have a time like COVID times. I'm sure anyone who's listening right now, in times of COVID, it's almost easier to lead because you have a common enemy and a common goal. So, look, we have this COVID challenge. We have to put in these new policies, new procedures. We've got extra work to do, and people rise to the challenge because we know that it's a real issue, and people unify under that. Where it becomes difficult is when it's an average year and you're trying to figure out, how do I get these people excited? How do I get them motivated? How do I get them engaged? You have to find a new challenge and a new goal to rally them under.
Yeah, that common goal is definitely crucial, right? That is what's going to get you through and towards towards getting to the end state that you want. And man, this has been absolutely fantastic. I've loved having you on the show, but unfortunately our time's come to an end. We're gonna have to wind down here. Before we wrap up, I do got a last couple of questions for you. And the next one is a question I ask all the guests here at Moving Forward Leadership, and that is, according to you, Adam Kreek, what makes a great leader?
A great leader is someone who has a clear vision and who can influence other people to achieve that vision.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And finally, man, how can people follow you? How can they find you? How can they be a part of your journey? Where can they find the book? It's all about you.
You can find me on LinkedIn. Every Thursday over the course of COVID, I'm running and we'll see how long we keep it. Every Thursday, I'm running an open coaching session, so you can sign up for that on Calendly just find me on LinkedIn, and you can find a link there. And I'd say that's probably the best way to reach me. You can reach me through the website as well, but that will go through my wife if you contact me through the website. So if you want to talk to me directly, just pop on LinkedIn and we'll have a conversation.
Awesome. For the listeners, always, it's easy for you. All links are in the show notes already. Adam, again, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule, man, and talking to me, but most importantly, the audience, listener.
Yes. Embrace the responsibility ethic. Lead now. It's great to meet you too, Scott.
All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember, R squared, S squared, right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R squared, rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.